Hey everybody, Adam Ant here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the server security and limiting accounts. And we do this both server side, and then we have some optional modified client software to help enforce this. But first of all, when you create your administrator account, you'll get these two things that look like recall runes. One of them is the core management console, and that's this guy here. And the other one is the client management console. This is where you can, the core management console is where you can set up how many accounts are allowed per player. You'll notice I didn't say per IP address, per player. And then you can also set independently of that concurrent. So the difference between concurrent and total, the max, is that, for instance, on Angel Island we allow 3 accounts, but we only allow 2 concurrently. Okay, so this is where you can configure those features. Then in the client management console, we enforce GameMaster.net's ClassicUO, GMN-CUO, and then GMN Razor. You may choose not to enable this enforcement, but if it's there, it gives you far greater control over the client-side software. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Razor first. The rest of the discussion will be on both IP management server side and then the additional support that our modified version of CUO gives. All right, so first of all, there are wildly powerful scripting assistants out there that players can use, and some of them are very complex. You can basically completely program every packet exchange with the server, and if you know what you're doing, you can create, robot macros that allow you to macro mine and then smelt the ingots and then take them to the vendor and put them on your vendor, whatever, or looting macros, which are far superior to standard Razor looting macros, PvP macros, all these things. And these scripting agents, assistants, give a significant advantage to certain players that are sufficiently savvy to construct these macros. So one of the things we wanted to do was ensure that everybody's using the same scripting assistant. And again, you can turn this off here if you don't care. But let me talk a little bit about if you do choose to use it, how it works. So there isn't. I'm not going to deep dive too much into it, but essentially, when Razor starts up, it negotiates with the server, and it's done this for a very long time. And it basically asks the server what things are okay for the user to configure. So you can tell the Razor that, for instance, you don't want the user adjusting light levels, right? You might have, for ambiance and immersion, you might want the player to use the light levels that you're providing. So that's the Razor negotiation feature. All Razor clients do this. What I did was augment the handshake with Razor to include some special bits that Razor should respond to. If Razor either doesn't respond because it's not a Razor client, or Razor doesn't respond because it's a standard issue and doesn't know about this special code handshake, or if it's too late to respond, then we raise some flags, and any one of three things can happen. Nothing, if you've configured the server to just ignore this, or a warning will be issued alerting the player to use the our website, gamemaster.net, but obviously for you it'll be your shards special Razor client. Or thirdly, they'll get a warning, and then 20 seconds later they'll get disconnected, so you can actually choose how it's handled, how a failure of the scripting engine to correctly respond to the server's query. Okay, so that's it for Razor. So the Razor modification is really the only thing done with Razor is to ensure that players are on a level playing field with regard to their scripting assistant. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about IP management. So when you're trying to limit connections to your server, for Angel Island you're allowed 3 accounts, and for Siege Perilous you're allowed 1 account. And oftentimes, the bar is pretty low. A lot of servers, the bar is pretty low. If the user, comes in with a VPN or something and creates another account, a lot of servers out there don't really do much about that. But for Siege, it's actually really important, because the whole point of Siege is that people are supposed to depend on other people in the game, other players in the game, and we don't want self-sufficient players. That is a player that's created 3 accounts on a server that's on a shard that only allows 1, and they've got a miner and a PvPer and a tamer, right? They're all self-sufficient now, and so they don't need other people. So if limiting accounts is indeed important for your shard, you can enable this functionality. Like the Razor handshake code, it is not required. You can turn it on or turn it off. Okay, so we'll circle back to the way. Well, since we're talking about it, let's go ahead and talk about the CUO interface. So let me see if I can find a little bit of code here. Similar to the way that the Razor interface works, we do a code handshake. We exchange packets with CUO, and if they don't respond or respond incorrectly, basically the same things that happen with a bad Razor is nothing if you've configured the server to nothing, a warning telling them to update to our version of CUO, your version of CUO, and then finally a warning with a disconnect shortly thereafter. Okay, so that's the enforcing common game client software, both CUO and Razor. Not terribly sophisticated. It's really, you'd have to jump through some hoops to work around it, but it's there and it raises the bar significantly. The other thing we did with CUO, and it's actually not really a new invention. OSI, let me see if I can, oh yeah, here it is. So OSI has sent the packet 0xD9 for as long as I can remember. The client sends that to the server, and that packet contains, let's see if I can find it, yeah. So packet D9 is the hardware info packet that the client sends to the server, and it's just a whole bunch of data. It's got the operating system version, the revision, the CPU manufacturer, the CPU family, model, clock speed, quantity, physical memory, all this stuff. It's just pretty pretty intense. I When I originally started writing Siege, I was using the OSI client, and I would regularly get this packet, and I would get a hash of this packet, and then I could tell if, by comparing the hash of the computer that's communicating with the server, I could tell if a player was connecting from the same computer even though they changed IP addresses. They have two connections to the server. One's on their normal, Comcast IP address, and the other one's a VPN. So a lot of servers would kind of stop there. We take it one step further and actually use this hardware info to determine that, even though you have different IP addresses coming in, we can see that these two connections are coming from the same computer. So that's a big win. I mean, that makes limiting accounts a lot easier and raises the bar a fair amount. So what's the modification to CUO? Well, turns out that ClassicUO does not implement packet D9. It's just they don't call it. When I started playing with ClassicUO to test it out before our launch, I found that it never sent the hardware info packet. OSI would send it pseudo randomly, once a day or twice a day, something. But CUO never sent it, so I downloaded the source code and looked at it and found that indeed they never sent it. So I actually implemented it and forked the CUO code. I actually I petitioned the ClassicUO folks to include it. They didn't seem particularly interested. And so I went ahead and put it in my own version of CUO. So now our CUO client does in fact send the hardware info packet to the server. The server then takes a hash of all this data and then stores it. And then when players log in, we look to see if this hash is being used elsewhere, if it's connected to another IP address, for instance. Okay, so that's really it. So for CUO, there's two things. There's the handshake to make sure that they're using the approved ClassicUO client, an approved client. And then secondly, we have updated CUO to send the hardware info packet 0xD9 so that the server has more tools in its toolbox to determine if people are trying to exceed the maximum accounts per player. Okay, and it actually works. It works really well. And like I mentioned early on, both of these things can be disabled here in the client management console. You can just turn these off. Okay, so there's that, and then you can also like I mentioned, you can set the number of accounts per IP, accounts per player, and concurrent accounts. All of these things can be configured in these consoles. You get two when you create your administrator character. There's actually about 6 or 8 of them. The other ones are, like for vendor management, for PvP or spell timing, or all these things can be configured dynamically without a rebuild or a restart. But these are the two when launching a new server that you're really going to be most concerned with. Okay, so then briefly I wanted to talk a little bit about the way we handle, independent of our custom Razor and custom CUO, we also do some reasonably sound IP handling on the server side. I mean, obviously, when a player connects, let's say you're allowed one account like Siege, and they try to connect with the same IP to another to another account. I mean, that's easy to catch. I mean, all free shards do that. But we take it one step further. I think by default, the RunUO core only remembers the IP address of when the account was created. We expanded that such that we actually keep a table of all your login IP addresses, or maybe not all of them, N. We have a most recently used list of IP addresses, and then we can cross-correlate that list of IP addresses when you're trying to log in to see if one of those IP addresses is actually being used on another account. Pretty good. It works pretty well. It gives us a little bit more power, a little bit more flexibility, and it makes it harder for players to skate around the system. Okay, so now let's talk about MaxMind. Let's see if I can find this here. MaxMind is a free geolocation database. It's already set up, but all you need to do is go to this URL shown here and create an account, and it's free. The paid version has features that we did not need, but the free version gives us exactly what we want to know. And so when you're using the free version, so essentially when a player logs in, I call the MaxMind database to determine if that IP address is associated with a hosting provider or data center, a VPN, a residential proxy. Also not listed here, it also tells you if it's an anonymous proxy, a Tor exit node, or a public proxy. So these all but number 4 here are really informational. We add these as flags to the account so we can get a better idea if we see, like what looks like robotic behavior, right? We see 2 players always following around each other and doing things that look robotic, but yet they are using different IP addresses. We will take a look at the account to see if maybe one of the accounts is always just a regular IP and the other one is always, for instance, an anonymous proxy. Then we might take a much closer look at it. We don't take automatic action based on that because there could be reasonable explanations. The one, though, that we toss them in jail immediately over is if they come in over a Tor exit node. And without getting into a lot of details, Tor exit nodes, you're most likely a bad actor. There's really no legitimate reason to come in that way. Okay, so I won't deep end there. So we use the MaxMind if you've configured it. And if you don't, then you simply don't get this IP lookup information. All right, and let's just take a quick look at the variables. You've got so when you log in, we set the flags on your account, right? If it's anonymous proxy, if it's completely anonymous VPN, hosting, we set all of this stuff, and then we carry on with the login. We don't block you. Our typical model is we don't block you from logging in. We have a cron task that runs later, which will do interesting things like toss you into jail or add you to our watch list, things of that nature. one of the reasons for doing it this way is because a lot of times we're going to want to talk to you about what's happening, what's going on. And if we block you from logging in, well, you usually just get a message on the message boards that says, hey, I can't log in. And unfortunately, the UO client doesn't have a rich set of responses from a login. You'll get like a bad password, or your account's been suspended, and maybe one more. I mean, it's not really sufficiently deep. So then we have to have them log in again and try to catch information on the console. By using this mechanism where we allow them to log in, and then we might perhaps jail them or put them on a watch list, we can observe their behavior and handle it in game, as opposed to just having them posting on the message boards that they can't log in. Okay. All right. So when you get MaxMind, they're going to give you three pieces of information. They're going to give you an integer account ID. They're going to give you a big long string for the license key, and then they give you a host. This is not really secret here. That's just the Geolite Info website that does the lookup. For our server, I just store them because it's secret information. I can't, because it's my account, I can't put that information here, my license key and my account ID. That's not really appropriate. But what you can do is you just stick them in an environment variable, and then when the system starts up, you'll have your account ID and license key, and you'll be rolling. You'll get the nice lookup information. So it's all built in. You don't have to do anything. If you configure the license key and account ID, it'll just work. And if you don't configure them via an environment variable, then nothing happens. It just continues on with regular login. Although it still does our pattern matching of IPs, but it won't be able to do the lookup of the type of IP it is. Okay, I think that covered it. This is our account for a player. Our account database has this, we have a database of IP addresses, so we're keeping track of all of your logins. We get your last game login, the creation login, but then all of the intermediate logins, which help us cross-correlate against different accounts. Okay, Razor handshake. Yeah, we covered all of this. Okay, so I think that's it. We covered the two optional client components. They need not be used, but if you use them, you'll get much better control over the maximum accounts that you want a human, not an IP address, but a player to have access to. It's not perfect. I'll just tell you up front that somebody with a VPN and running a couple of virtual machines, good virtual machines that sufficiently mask the hardware, then it's going to be much harder for us to succeed. But we've raised the bar as high as reasonably possible, and we're really keeping the honest people honest here. The really dedicated hardcore hacker, yeah, he's going to get in, but it's going to take some pretty extraordinary steps to do so. Okay, so that's it. Covered the way we pattern match IP addresses, how we use MaxMind to find out what kind of connection they're coming over on, and if we should look closer at their behavior, robots, whatever. And then we looked at the two client components, which you can use to make your maximum accounts handling much more robust. All right, that's it. See you in the next video. Bye.